When God says wait, it doesn't feel holy. It feels heavy. It feels like silence when you've prayed for answers, like stillness when your spirit is desperate for movement. You say you trust Him, but when the door doesn't open, when the healing doesn't come, when the promise still feels years away, your faith isn't just tested, it's exposed. And that's why Abraham's story is not just a lesson in patience, it's a prophetic warning. What you do in the waiting reveals who you believe God really is. Abraham didn't get a child the day he received the promise. In fact, 25 years passed between the word and the wonder. That means for over 2 decades, he had to hold on to a word from God with no evidence, no progress, and no confirmation, just faith. But this is what separates those who are chosen from those who are comfortable. The chosen don't need constant proof to keep walking. They need presence. God told Abraham in Genesis 12, "Go to the land I will show you." Not the land I'll explain, not the land I'll define, but the land I'll show you. In other words, start walking and I'll start revealing. And some of you are stuck because you're waiting for instructions before you obey. But God gives vision in motion, not in hesitation. Waiting isn't weakness. It's where strength is forged in the fire of uncertainty. It's where motives are purified. Because you'll never know how much you idolized the outcome until God delays it. You'll never know how much you relied on your own timing until God breaks your timeline. Abraham and Sarah believed the promise, but when years went by and nothing changed, they did what many of us do. They tried to help God. Enter Hagar, enter Ishmael. Enter the consequences of taking a shortcut through divine territory. See, shortcuts always create side effects. The shortcut cost them peace, unity, and ultimately created a generational conflict that echoes even today. And here's the sobering truth. The enemy doesn't have to destroy your promise. He just has to convince you to rush it. He just has to convince you that God is taking too long, that maybe the promise wasn't literal, that maybe you should interpret it differently. But faith that bends in delay is faith that hasn't matured. Abraham's faith grew stronger, not in the victory, but in the in-between. Romans 4:20 says, "Yet he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, but was strengthened in his faith and gave glory to God." That means praise came before fulfillment. He didn't wait until Isaac was born to worship. He worshipped with empty arms, which is perhaps the purest kind of praise. And let's not forget, Abraham wasn't always strong. He lied about his wife to Pharaoh. He laughed at God's promise. He doubted in moments. But here's the grace of it. God counts your faithfulness, not your failures. When heaven looks at Abraham, it doesn't record every time he tripped. It records that he believed. Why? Because in God's economy, persistent belief outweighs momentary weakness. That should give you hope. You don't have to be perfect in the wait. You just have to be planted. You just have to stay in position. And perhaps the most revealing moment in Abraham's story isn't the birth of Isaac. It's the moment when God asked him to give Isaac back. After waiting 25 years, after loving this child, watching him grow, celebrating the miracle, God says in Genesis 22, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and sacrifice him." Let that sink in. God didn't just test Abraham's faith in the waiting. He tested it in the fulfillment. Because sometimes the blessing becomes the new idol. Sometimes the thing God gave you becomes the thing you cling to more than Him. But Abraham, now matured by the journey, obeys. He climbs the mountain. He binds the promise to the altar, and right before the knife falls, God intervenes, not because He wanted Isaac's death, but because He wanted Abraham's heart. That's what waiting does. It clarifies who you worship. Do you worship the dream or the God who gave it? Do you love the promise or the promise keeper? This is where many miss it. You think waiting is punishment, but waiting is a filter. It's God's way of removing everything that can't carry the weight of the next season. It's not wasted time. It's preparation time. It's where character is chiseled. It's where ego is killed. It's where you learn to walk by faith, not sight. And if you rush it, if you try to take the throne before you've passed the test, you'll build a life on sand. But when you wait on God, when you refuse to settle for Ishmael, when you trust that His word will not return void, something supernatural happens. Not just to your situation, but to your soul. Isaiah 40:31 says, "Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." Not those who whine, not those who worry, not those who wander, those who wait. There's a hidden strength that only shows up in surrender. There's a supernatural power that only manifests when you choose faith over force. So what's the lesson from Abraham? Simple. When God says wait, don't just sit, worship. Don't just cry, cling. Don't just wish, walk. Obedience in the delay is still obedience. And remember, the longer the wait, the bigger the weight of glory coming. God wasn't just giving Abraham a son. He was creating a nation, a legacy, a lineage that would lead to the Messiah himself. That's why the wait was so long. Because the purpose was so massive. And maybe the reason your promise is taking so long is because what God is building through you is generational. Maybe what feels like a delay is actually God securing the foundation so the blessing won't break you. Maybe you're not just carrying your dream, you're carrying destiny for others. And that's why you can't give up. That's why you can't compromise. That's why you must stay rooted even when it feels like nothing is moving. Because faith is not proven by speed, it's proven by surrender. So what will you do in your waiting? Will you worship with empty hands? Will you praise while you're still childless, jobless, answerless? Will you guard your altar from the vultures of fear? Will you refuse to manufacture an Ishmael because you trust that Isaac is still on the way? Will you be the kind of believer who doesn't just believe when it's easy, but believes when it's excruciating? Because the real test is not how loud your faith is in the miracle. It's how quiet your obedience is in the waiting. And if God trusted Abraham enough to wait, then maybe the waiting is a sign that He trusts you. 2. He trusts you to keep walking even when it's unclear. He trusts you to believe even when it's irrational. He trusts you to surrender even when it feels unfair. That's the mark of a friend of God. Not perfection, but perseverance. So take this to heart. When God says wait, He's not being cruel. He's being kind. He's letting you grow into the person who can carry what He's about to release. The wait is where He weans you off self-reliance. The wait is where He removes every false security. The wait is where your identity shifts from achiever to receiver, from striver to son or daughter. Don't despise the wait. Don't rush the process. Trust the God of Abraham who never wastes a single second. Because if He said it, He will do it. Not on your schedule, but on His. And when the fulfillment finally comes, you won't just rejoice because the promise arrived. You'll rejoice because you were faithful in the fire. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. That's the reward. Your takeaway. The wait isn't God forgetting you. It's God forming you. So the next time you're tempted to doubt, to compromise, to take control, remember Abraham, remember the altar, remember the silence, remember the sacrifice, and choose faith, choose patience, choose trust. Because when God says wait, He's not withholding, He's preparing, and what's coming will be worth every second.